At a city railway station, there lived a beggar who survived by asking for alms from passengers on the trains that came and went. One day, whilst he was begging, he spotted a tall man dressed in a smart suit. He thought to himself, "This man looks very wealthy. If I ask him for money, he'll surely give me something generous." He approached the tall man and began to beg. Looking at the beggar, the tall man said, "Do you always just ask for things? Have you ever given anything to anyone?" The beggar replied, "Sir, I'm just a beggar. I'm always asking people for money. How could I possibly afford to give anything to anyone?" The tall man responded, "If you can't give anything to anyone, then you have no right to ask either. I'm a businessman, and I only believe in transactions. If you have something to offer me, only then can I give you something in return." Having said this, the tall man boarded the train and left. The beggar stood there, pondering what he'd just heard. The tall man's words struck a chord deep within his heart. He began to think that perhaps he didn't receive much in alms because he never gave anything back in return. But he was just a beggar. What could he possibly have to give? How long can I keep taking from people without giving anything back? He wondered. After much contemplation, the beggar made a decision. Whoever gave him alms would receive something from him in return. But the question remained. What could he, a beggar, possibly give? 2 days passed as he wrestled with this question, finding no answer. On the third day, as he sat near the station, his eyes fell upon some flowers blooming on plants around the station. He thought, "Why don't I give people some flowers in exchange for their alms?" He liked this idea and immediately picked some flowers. When he went to beg on the trains, whenever someone gave him alms, he would give them a few flowers in return. People happily accepted the flowers and kept them. Now the beggar would pick flowers daily and distribute them in exchange for alms. Within just a few days, he noticed that far more people were giving him money. He would collect all the flowers from around the station, and as long as he had flowers to give, many people would give him alms. But when his flowers ran out, he'd receive nothing. This continued for some time. One day, whilst begging, he saw the same tall man on the train, the very person who had inspired him to give flowers in exchange for alms. He rushed over to him and said, "Today I have some flowers to give you. If you give me alms, I'll give you flowers in return." The tall man gave him some money, and the beggar handed him some flowers. The tall man was delighted. "Brilliant," he exclaimed. "You've become a trader like me now." Saying this, he took the flowers and got off at his station. But once again, the tall man's words resonated deeply within the beggar's heart. He kept thinking about what had been said, and a wave of happiness washed over him. His eyes began to sparkle. He felt as though he'd found the key to success, the key that could transform his life. He immediately got off the train, and filled with excitement, looked up at the sky and shouted loudly, "I'm not a beggar. I'm a trader. I can become wealthy too." People who saw him thought the beggar had gone mad, and from the next day onwards, that beggar was never seen at the station again. 6 months later, at the same station, 2 men in smart suits were traveling together. When they spotted each other, one extended his hand and said, "Do you recognize me?" The other man replied, "No, I don't believe we've met before." The first man smiled. "No, do think carefully. This isn't our first meeting. It's actually our third." The second man said, "I don't recall. When did we meet before?" The first man smiled warmly and said, "We met twice before on this very train. I'm that beggar you once spoke to. In our tall businessman in the story understood the law of give and take very well. All successful business people in the world have achieved success by using this principle of life. He shared this formula with the beggar as well.